Welcome to Untold Insights. My name is James Collier, and today we are very happy to welcome Serg Masis, who is a data scientist of some renown in the agritech industry. Serg, thank you for coming and meeting with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for
Fantastic,
inviting me.
and so it's a real pleasure to have you. As I mentioned, you're in agritech, but obviously it would be great to just hear how the founder of a bubble tea company came to be in such an illustrious position as helping to feed the world's next 2 billion people.
Uh, yeah, that's a lot of weight on my shoulder. I mean, we're 50,000 employees, just FYI, upwards of 50,000 globally. So I'm not alone in that journey, at least in my company. If we include every other company, well, quite a few of us. And if you include farmers, well, they do the heavy lifting, if you will. Um, but yeah, yeah, my journey hasn't been like direct or straightforward. Like often I get people asking things like, how do I get into data science? How do I get into agritech? How do I get? And I never know what to answer because I didn't like just swoop in into it. Like I didn't take like really discrete like premeditated steps towards that. It was more like a arduous journey starting from when I, studied computer science because I like computers, but like I was more interested in other aspects than, like just I was interested in programming, but as a tool to do other things,
Right.
right? Data, of course, was one of them, but like just the idea of studying data back then wasn't like that appealing. Data was small, was slow, it wasn't that interesting, like it had many limitations.
And it was ugly.
Um,
Often.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And often there were situations where I had to maintain a database, and like they would set like last name no more than 20 characters, right? And then you would have all these truncated last names,
Mm.
and just ugly, like solutions, right? Because there were limitations. So I wasn't I kind of drifted into what was the most exciting part of computer science back then, which was web development. So I got into web development and I was there for a long time. And then, well, web development was exciting because information was there, right?
Mhm.
It was the backbone of everything, and it also connected so many people. And that's what got me into it. But just developing wasn't that appealing to me. After a while, I realized that what's more interesting with me was like what was starting to become more and more data that was kind of driving an interest. Like
Mhm.
I was understanding that people that were visiting, they were generating all this data and logs, and suddenly over time I was able to capture it and realize there's a mountain of valuable information here that can mine, right?
Right.
And of course it was
Absolutely.
called data mining then, and I didn't really see it as data mining. I just saw it an extension of my work, optimizing like websites from that point of view. I realized later that was called conversion optimization.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just stumbled upon these things that were interesting to me, SEO, and the common denominator was data, was
Right.
analytics. So I got more caught up in that part. So I became very good at development, but I was like, by then I was more interested. Okay, I'll just manage a team. I'll be, leading the team, and they'll do all the grunt work, and I'll be focused on the data.
You'll be the guy
And
behind
then
the curtain.
yeah, yeah. And that's great because the data was informing what
Mhm.
needed to happen. So wherever I worked, I brought that tool set with me, and I was like, you know, I'll install the analytics, get the CRMs, get all the systems in place, and then see all that data coming in, and then use that to improve the websites
Yeah.
and, both internal and external, right? So that's where I came from, but I didn't realize for the longest time that that was my passion. I still kind of saw myself as a developer, strangely enough. Um, for a longest time. And then the bubble tea thing was, just a side business I set up with my brother.
Okay.
Um, you know, but because we like bubble tea, and also it was kind of a data project on itself because like this is a business that you need a lot of volume to be able to, you know, you're selling like $3 or $4 drinks. I mean, you have to be making, a lot of sales to actually
A
stay in
lot.
business.
Yeah, right.
So that means that you have to, well, they were cheap too because I was near a university. So
Got to focus on price point then.
yes, exactly. Exactly. So it was mission critical
Mhm,
to understand what the trends were. Another thing is that it took a long time to transport the goods from Taiwan where
mhm.
they were manufactured, all the boba and all that. And that took months. So I had to know ahead of time, what flavors were of interest, and
Right.
I
We'll try and
I didn't
predict
have a
even.
good exactly. I
Yeah.
didn't have a great margin for you know error there.
Yeah.
Because if I picked the wrong flavor, and it so happened many times, I maybe was 2 weeks off on a popular flavor, and I had to come up with, a last minute like marketing scheme to kind of stretch
Yeah.
that flavor, combine it with something else or come up with something. I came up with Nutella bubble tea. Everybody likes Nutella, so it was like, something that might kind of all the people that were like focused on kiwis. Who knows? Maybe some of them would be interested
But
in
it's still
Nutella.
ultimately, to your point, it's still about data. You're surfacing insights, right? You're looking at
Mm,
trends, surfacing
yeah,
insights,
yeah,
then trying to put them into practice. Various outputs. The output being marketing, or it could be price point, it could
yeah,
be, or it is the flavor. It's exactly that. So you're data
yeah,
led, you would say, in
yeah,
your development of your career. But that being said, you're right. It's a very organic journey, and from my experience of coming into tech as I did, which was more as someone who just wants to come up with ideas and work with people that were smarter than me. Um, I would say that my journey will be virtually impossible today. And that's to be that organic. When I look at people who are doing corporate development strategy or going into kind of C-level roles in organizations, they're asking for MBAs, they're asking for lots of other an indiscriminate list of extracurricular and curricular activities to kind of to fit that mold. Do you
yes,
see do you see in terms of an impact on talent? I'm asking you about the broader kind of data science world. Do you see that as having an impact on the types of people that come into it and the
yes,
way that people approach that work?
absolutely. I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but I see it as a problem.
Okay.
Like there's a lot of data, a lot like web, and that's where I make these parallels with what was my former career.
Hmm.
Like web, the first people that were interested in creating websites, they were, you know, self-taught people, you
Hmm.
know, well, a combination between self-taught people and people that maybe got their PhDs in Berkeley and all these prestigious universities and happen to stumble upon these technologies because that's where they were engaging that universities were engaging with websites long before like the general public were.
Right.
But like the same has happened with AI, and a lot of data technologies, like there was this cross section of like hobbyists and
Hmm.
people that were just uh, kind of early adopters on the public side and PhDs involved in, I wouldn't say data in general. Of course, everybody was using Excel, but I'm talking like, big data tools,
Yeah.
Hadoop and things like that, and then AI methods, so there was and then what's happened over the years is that of course there's been some gatekeeping and
Hmm.
now there's all these different requirements and so like what you're getting is a lot of people that are transitioning from a formal education in computer science directly into data science or people that have some hard science education and some data along with it, and they're also transitioning. And then it's making it more difficult for people that know about data because they've worked with data for
Mm,
years, and and they're technologically capable. You're technologically literate enough to deal with tools, so it would be like an easy transition for them.
right.
If you ask me, I'd rather, if I work in a if say I'm the CEO of a company and I have, Sue from marketing who's been, you know, well versed on marketing, right? And working there for years, she doesn't have any fancy titles, but train her in data science for a few months, and she'll be able to do a lot more than she does right now. Train her in AI or whatever. Why would I discard her skills rather than hire someone with with a fancy data science degree or like a computer science degree? It just doesn't make any sense, because then you're taking that computer science person, they have to learn all the domain knowledge,
Right.
right? And
Completely.
that's the hardest part.
And I think that organizationally there's been some learnings there. There was definitely, from my observation, a curve in, let's say, non-data centric organizations hiring data scientists because they wanted certain types of outcomes, right? They were like, oh, well,
Yeah,
we need models. We want to do predictive stuff. They probably didn't know what it meant, but they figured they needed someone to do that. And they quickly hired into this space. And then you've seen that talent all kind of wash out slightly. Um,
yeah.
and people kind of just returning to relying either on platforms or on outsourcing or whatever it might be. But do you think that's kind of part of that journey of so that ultimately, whilst we everyone wants to talk a good game on data, they don't really necessarily know what it is that they want to get out of it in the first place, and therefore they hire in the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think they first they they need to hire data analysts first and foremost. That's
Right.
like the first. But of course, you need some infrastructure along with the data analyst. So maybe a data engineer before the data analyst.
Hmm.
But it depends what kind of. If you already have like a pre-existing system,
Hmm.
you might need some people to kind of organize that before and create the data lake and everything so the data analyst can work.
Yeah.
But let's assume you already have that. Hire the data analyst
Yeah.
and let them understand that. But then the thing is, if you go too far down that rabbit hole, with the data analyst, there's all like these entrenched biases that companies have about, what the data reflects about them, what stories the data tells.
Mm.
So like that's one of the things that I think separate a data scientist and a data analyst the most. It's not the skill set might be exactly the same,
Hmm.
in many cases it is. It's all in the word science. It's not. It's just simply the approach is one where we're we're taught to question
Yeah.
things a lot more. We're taught to tell let the data tell the story, and not come with it like an informed, like, okay, this is the story it has to tell, let's make it confess kind of attitude. And I'm not saying all analysts do that. I'm just saying it's more. I've
No.
I've seen it in places where I work, where it's more like they're looking to their managers to tell them, I want this report, and they go off and they make it, and they don't question they see anything wrong, because
Correct.
it's just that's what I was asked to do.
Yeah, so and I definitely agree with you there, and I think you saw that very much so when the bigger trend of being a kind of a BI analyst, where you'd be using Tableau or Looker or Power BI,
Yeah,
whatever platform it was, and
yeah,
they'd be told to go and represent data in a certain way. They'd be literally told what they want the output to be, and that
yeah.
person would have to go find the data and make it look the way that the company wanted to make it look. And I think that's probably another contributor to that trend of seeing kind of the data science kind of flow out of certain types of organizations is because data scientists don't work that way. It can't work that
No,
way in order to be a data scientist. You have to be, you have to, judge the data on its merit and only you can only represent it as it is or how the model is shown. Um,
Yeah.
so, but on that, on that aspect of having this data lake, and let's not assume that people have it. That also not just for the data scientist, but for AI as a whole, which you touched on, having that data readiness it, there in place before it reaches the data scientist or any kind of LLM or whatever the output AI output you're looking for is, must be vital, right? I mean, this is the point where the kind of garbage in, garbage out thing comes around. And what have been your experience? I guess I don't know what you, and actually it might be worth you talking about first, your kind of experiences of utilization in AI today, but then
Mhm.
also, what are you seeing? Are people really preparing themselves correctly? Are they thinking about how they can responsibly surface data into these environments, and how is that working?
I think they are. I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, there's a level of kind of fatigue that happens, I
Hmm.
think, in every project, because there is pressure
Of
to
course.
get models out as quickly as possible. So there's only so much you can do to the data before that.
Mhm.
But you realize that data is something that needs to be refined.
Yeah.
So if you think of that like common uh, way of kind of looking at data, which is data as oil, right?
Yeah.
If data is oil, like the data that we need for machine learning, AI, is like the kind of data, oil that you put, or like petrol that you put in a plane, right? It has,
Correct. Yeah.
or like a race car. It has to be very pure, very powerful, you know, refined to like the max. It can't be, uh, you know, less refined. So like that's the difference, I think, with the data we use for machine learning and data that's used for data analysis. That's a different one of the differences there. I think it's a very important one, which is like for machine learning, every data point counts,
Right.
right? When you're doing a report, like in Looker or Tableau, like you see a lot of averages, medians. You might go as far as going quartiles, deciles, whatever, right?
Right.
You're not. It doesn't matter if you have a few outliers, but those outliers make a big difference in machine learning,
Hmm.
because if you happen to have you're predicting a data point that is near an outlier, you're going to get an incorrect
Right.
result. You're getting something unexpected. So that's why it needs to be refined, and you have to really have that outlook that you can't be, in the grand scheme of things, something may seem small, but someone is going to get a crappy prediction because you didn't clean it enough,
Yeah.
or because perhaps you just threw all the data into the model and didn't notice there was an extra column, and that provides some leakage or something to that effect. And so you it's something that wouldn't matter in other circumstances, but for
Right.
machine learning it does.
And I
So
guess,
that's when organizations have to realize, I'm sorry,
yeah,
interrupting,
no, no, go
have
ahead.
to realize that that's why in the previous organization I worked for, like when I told my the people, I, I think it was the CTO or CIO, that the company had a data problem, that there were data quality issues.
Hmm.
He couldn't believe me, because like all the data analysts and all the managers were like, "Oh yeah, like look at these reports, they're beautiful. Look at these metrics, they look great."
Yeah.
But I mean, that's all averages.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work on a more granular level,
Hmm.
right? And if you're trying to whip out machine learning models, you stumble upon problems that otherwise would be completely unseen.
For sure. And what I was actually going to say there was actually part of that process is what is being predicted, or what is the output. Like, how important is the goal? Sometimes determines whether people put any importance on those outliers. And what I mean by that is, let's say you were talking about web data before, and people are doing kind of trying to put predictive analytics or build audiences for ad targeting around that, they don't really care too much. And a small refinement goes a long way. And most of the time, a result is a result. Um, but when you are looking at decisioning or making decisions on specific things around what, for, in your instance, it might be research, right? Could be research
Mhm.
based, or in other instances, it could be in finance. It becomes very important, those outliers by comparison.
Yeah,
So I think, the level of importance that's put up on, that, and I guess it comes down to the quality over quantity idea, right? Is
yeah,
and and whether or not that actually makes a difference. And I think the level of investment that companies make really do depend on that output. And so when they invest lots of money in buying in data scientists, for instance, they are thinking they're going to get this high degree of output, and it doesn't come to fruition because they're not really focused on quality of data. They're focused on shoving all their data in there and getting some kind of output or return, and it doesn't really come back to them.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's
Or they kind of exhausted so much effort in trying to clean the data, and they're
yeah,
like, it sometimes could take a longer time than management anticipates,
there's
right?
that.
And then they're like, well, where's the model? Where's the model? And so they whip up something, and just it works, of course. It seems like it's working. And the thing is, they don't it's a continual process too.
Yeah,
Like through explainable AI, through like all kinds of observability methods, you could refine the data, over time.
yeah,
Keep improving the data quality over time as you realize things surface.
yeah.
But this is not done that often. Usually it's like it's in a model centric view, what you keep improving is not the model, not the data.
Mm. Right. And I think, well, especially when you're investing in, a data science organization, you're going to want them to be the ones that are going to be doing the work, right? You're expecting them to make the changes. You're not necessarily thinking about the data because those are the people in front of you. Those are the people
Yeah,
providing the output. It's like, well, your output isn't
yeah,
right, so you've got to improve the output. And it's kind of
yeah,
thinking of those data scientists as data analysts rather than as data
yeah,
scientists, going back full circle on that subject.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, with that in mind, though, do you see what do you see as the role of data scientists as, moving into this kind of the subject of AI? What do you see the role of data scientists when in the use of kind of the LLMs or even creation of custom LLMs in large scale organizations?
I think the role is primarily should be focused on evaluation, especially
Yeah.
like not every organization is going to fine tune or train from scratch an
Hmm.
LLM. I
Right.
mean, especially train from scratch is going to be pretty rare. Probably only happen if you have like a specialized like use case. Say you're a law firm and you
Hmm.
want to do like a law based kind of
Energy trading
LLM.
or something like that. Or
Exactly, exactly. Or you have this rare language that is not represented or it's not well represented, you know. But you're probably going to rely on foundational just because simply the cost
Mhm.
of retraining, the all the measures that are done, whether you agree with it being good or not, or hallucinating or not, you're just simply probably it's the most cost effective thing to.
Mhm.
But then the focus should be on evaluating the LM for your use case, right? First and
Mhm.
foremost. And yeah, there's plenty of like prompt engineering techniques that can go through it. There's plenty of tools you could use to make it better. I mean, even for RAG, or which is retrieval augmented generation, or whether you're using like an API that calls something on your server. Like say you're saying doing a chatbot for your users, and they want to sign up for something. So you would be kind of doing offering that through the chat, so they could, okay, what's your name, and they enter their name, and that sort of like
Mhm.
feedback loop where they're doing that, and so you'd be calling an API on their behalf, and that may be like really convenient for the user, but it also requires plenty of like evaluation steps,
Yeah.
plenty of of making sure that it's meeting up to those expectations, which is something like I try to like uh, it's something I realized over the years. Like when I've talked to people about responsible AI, I think, oh, that's nice. You're in ethics, right?
Right.
Like it's
You must be
something.
this one thing if you're thinking about this thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like it doesn't seem like business friendly. It
Yeah.
seems like condescending in a way, right? Which is stupid,
Yeah.
because to me it's like responsible. I mean, it's good for business.
Hmm.
It's quality assurance.
Yeah.
So now I like to frame it as an exercise in quality assurance. Like if we're trying to make a serious product here, it's not a toy. You know, it's something that's costing a lot. So you
Yeah.
have to make it quality assured.
Sure. And risk mitigation is a huge concern. It's one of the primary barriers to I think, the large scale adoption of whether it be custom or otherwise LLMs, right? Is that it's difficult to understand the provenance of decision making within them. Therefore, you have to be absolutely certain on the data going in and in your the, one of the things you raised here, the prompt engineering, that you are framing things correctly to make sure that you're getting that kind of quality output, but actually a riskless output as well, right? Or a low risk output.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's easy. It's easy. The thing is to go through like anecdotal kind of evidence with LLMs. It's not an easy thing to evaluate.
mhm.
You know, you could like ask people to enter a different variants of a question you think users will ask, right?
Yeah,
But you're not going to exhaust the thousands of combinations of questions
right.
they could ask that are similar, right? So you have to find ways to do that. You could even ask an LLM, give me 1,000 variants of this one
Yeah,
question, right? And it would do it. You could use other techniques to kind of replace like certain words in different ways and so forth to create these variants and then test the LLM against them, against these very questions using different variants of your prompts.
right.
So it can quickly scale to be something really convoluted,
Yeah.
but it's
It's a
necessary
snake eating
because you
itself.
don't know. Yeah, because it's so open-ended.
Mm,
That's the problem. It's not like it's not like other generative AI is not like other like discriminative AI, which
yeah,
is you're simply gonna get even though it's complicated, it's still like stochastic and you don't know what you're gonna get. You're still gonna get a finite set of results in many cases. Like say it's a classification, you're only going to get like one or two or three, whatever classes you have, right? And that's it. But with generative AI, you could get anything. So it's just that's what makes it so difficult to evaluate.
for sure. So, I mean, this leads us nicely into, I guess, and it sounds like this responsible AI is one of the things, but what are the things you're really caring about right now in relation to data science world, the work that you do and developments in your practice? What are the things that matter today or that you see to matter in the near future?
Well, I think, and it's one thing I hope that happens before the proverbial shit hits the fan, if you don't mind me saying
Yeah,
that.
of course.
I mean, is that the tent is expanded in such a way where people get a taste of what AI is before they get caught. They get like it gets satanized by the media
Hmm.
as it has. Because there's like, a lot of to the layman, they've heard two stories about AI. It's either evil and it's going to take over the world, they're going to lose their job, or it might be something more friendly. Well, not friendly, but terrible, but not
Students
something that's
using
going to
it to, do their exams and things like that. That's generally the other story, isn't
exactly,
it?
exactly. Or it's something that's going to, it's going to save the world or whatever.
Yeah,
Like, but it's there's not a lot of nuance in the discussion.
yeah,
And that's part of the ignorance that behind this technology where people haven't experienced it. other than, as an spectator, right?
Hmm.
Maybe they use, Midjourney or ChatGPT or whatever, but they haven't experienced like what it is to make it.
Hmm.
And something that I remember from back in the day, and with websites, like a lot of people were creating their amateur websites, and they were experiencing what it was like and what they could do, and and this was before it became corporate, right?
Yeah.
Before like there were just so many big web companies. And so I think now if it actually, the tent expanded and there were more people coming in and actually working, and not working but kind of trying things out and testing things, it would be a good time because it's cheap enough, and people can get into the space, get a taste for it before they start to form an opinion. And what I mean about the proverbial shit in the fan is like, I mean, I worry things could happen sooner than that, like very threatening things, with misinformation,
Hmm.
especially with elections this year, and,
Coming.
possible conflicts. And then it's just gonna, you know, possibly, hopefully not, create this circumstance where like there's a freeze on a lot of development, where people are like, governments start to clamp down on things, and the technology kind of or it's used as an excuse for big companies to just
Yeah.
take stop or open sourcing their technologies as they have,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
It's
you're
just,
already seeing some of that on the supply chain end with the GPUs, right? The governments are
yeah,
very heavily like
yeah,
controlling the flow
yeah,
of where those go and who gets to utilize the highest performing ones. So already the use
yes.
cases are becoming very refined. Who gets access and how they get access is becoming very refined at the very kind of bottom, or should we say top of the funnel, I guess you would say. So how that filters down, I guess, to the consumer is a big question mark. I guess that's what you're coming to, right?
Well, no, well, for a lot of use cases, you don't need high-end GPUs
That's
to
true.
create models or to use them, you know. And also, I think at the speed consumer um, hardware
Yeah.
is becoming cheaper and more powerful
Mm.
year after year, soon enough, you'll be able to run a GPT model on your phone. So
Yeah.
it's really gonna lessen the barrier right now. And I think a lot of people will, they'll wonder, well, what would it be like to create an Alexa, for
Yeah.
my home? Just put these different parts together. They're not literally gonna train like a voice recognition software or do anything like that. They're gonna take something that is already almost there, and they might have to do a few things too. But I think they can take control of your technology a lot more,
Hmm.
and that kind of sense of ownership that comes from trying, not only trying a technology that's provided by a company, but actually making something is something that goes a long way in making a technology popular.
Hmm.
And we've seen it throughout the years with, whether it was with blockchain and all the hype that came with it, or, um, for a while there
NFTs
was
as well.
technology
Yeah.
and NFT streaming,
Oh,
whatever. There's a lot of people,
yeah.
behind it,
Hmm.
more as hobbyists than as spectators.
And I do think that AI is a lot more, let's say, mass audience friendly than things like blockchain. The use cases, the genuinely useful use cases for blockchain were much more about supply chain, right? Much more about the
Yeah.
contract aspect, the smart contracts, really, than whether or not you're buying Bitcoin and selling it at a profit a few months later. And I guess it goes round kind of again, going full circle. You're talking expanding the tent and incorporating those kind of citizen data scientists, the citizen machine learning engineers, developing that talent now within a community of non kind of, let's say, academically centric data scientists, machine learning people, or people who are coming from large scale organizations and training those models for specific products. Is that what you mean? It's getting those citizen data
Yeah.
scientists in.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why, like, my focus right now has been writing my book, Do
Okay.
It Yourself AI, and it's
Fantastic.
precisely about that. It's about, it's 10 chapters, and they're devoted to each one to a different like technology they can develop, whether it's like a facial recognition system for your home,
Hmm.
and this could be like something that notifies you if you're who's at the door, or and you don't have to rely on uh, one of these off-the-shelf technologies
Hmm.
that who knows where they're storing the data. You could do one yourself, or you could do a sound classification system, or you could do a chatbot, or like each chapter has a different
That's
um,
super cool. Well, and it's a good plug. And when is this coming out?
uh, September.
September. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll look forward to it on Amazon, I'm assuming, and your own website. Um,
yeah,
Very cool. Well,
yeah,
yeah, and so on that note, I guess before we wrap up, I did want to touch on what you do today, right? So we talked about where
yeah.
you came from, we talked about things that matter in the industry, but what matters in your industry today, and what is the most prominent work that you're seeing in data science within the agri-tech community?
Oh, well, it's huge. It's used a
Right.
lot for like the R&D people are using. I mean, it's for discovery of proteins,
Hmm.
for unlocking like mechanisms in plants. A whole bunch of things that I don't understand because they have to do with genetics.
Right.
Manipulating different mechanisms to protect like the seed from, and subsequently the plant from all kinds of pests,
Without the
fungus, and
use of
so on.
pesticides, for instance. So is that
Exactly.
gotcha?
Yeah. And then biologicals, which are like using biology
Hmm.
to protect the crop against, you know, biological menaces. Traditionally, you use chemicals for that,
Right.
but we're also figuring out what kind of um, like say a fungus that is a good fungus and will protect the plant from a bad one, like that sort of thing.
Understood.
So like there's a lot of cool techniques in bioengineering that haven't been unlocked because there's just the search scope is so big
Right.
to find the appropriate like molecule, or the appropriate, chemical, or what have you, protein,
Hmm.
to actually make something work. But when you have generative AI and you have a better understanding of how these things work, which they have so far, there's so much that can be done. So that's just on the R&D side. And I can't speak at length at that because I work on the digital agronomy side.
Okay.
And the digital agronomy side is more um, farmer facing. So it's
Interesting.
more about the decisions the farmer makes, which are critical to whether it's a good yield or a bad yield. It's not the farmer's fault because it's just really hard these days with all the different with climate change,
Hmm.
all the different pests that have exacerbating, like people, contamination, so many different things
Sure.
that affect fields. So like they we need the kind of decisions they make are things like what to plant, when to plant, what seeds to use, if to spray, when to spray, where to spray on their farm, you
Wow.
know.
Yeah.
And so these things actually, paradoxically, they you know they're about they actually might have the farmer buy less product from the company,
Right.
but the idea is to have the use to be sustainable, to
Mhm.
be responsible.
Yeah.
So it does no service to the farm if the farmer is spraying indiscriminately
Right.
herbicides, if there's no risk, or if it's less risk in part of the farm and a lot of risk in another part of it. So
Oh, if
that's
you're
where we
selling a
come.
bunch of grain and it's got low yield, it builds a lack of trust in the business as well, right? Kind of
Yeah,
that. building loyalty as well as building sustainability. It's a virtuous
Yeah.
circle, I think, in that instance, right?
Yeah.
And I guess data gathering in that instance. I mean, how given that these farmers, I mean, I'm assuming that many of these are large scale farmers, but obviously there is a huge proportion of people who grow food at the lower end of the chain, right? China,
Yeah.
India, even in Latin America, where your business I think is particularly strong. They're not
Yeah.
all big producers. So how do you gather data to inform you on that kind of stuff?
Well, we have agronomists that
Right.
work really closely with farmers.
Okay.
We do trials with them, and that's something a lot of companies of our
Okay.
scale do with farmers. So we have partnerships with them. So scouters, trialists, you know, boots on the ground, basically.
Human in the loop.
Um, absolutely. And of course, there's all kinds of other data. We have satellite data. We have uh, what else? Oh yeah, we have how do you call those? Meteorological stations,
Okay.
for
Yeah.
climate. We have a bunch of stuff like that. So yeah, without that, it's hard to make. You have to. It's not only about the decisions of people, but the decisions of people have a lot to do with the weather in
Of
farming,
course. Yeah.
and the soil health. So it's critical to know what kind of soil they have, and then also what kind of weather.
Yeah.
Those are like the
Absolutely. I kind of, well, I can imagine like, highly acidic or highly alkali in, very hot, very very wet environments all have a specific impact. You've got rot, you've got drought. It's all these things that you've got to incorporate. But I mean, that's a
yeah.
huge volume of data points that you're talking about that you've got to measure, and some are time based and some are very steady. Wow. It sounds super interesting anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of satellite images too. Yeah,
Fantastic.
you seem to know a lot about this.
No,
Were
no,
you
I
a
just
farmer at some point,
no.
or?
Well, no, no. I grew up on a commune where
Oh, okay.
we grew a lot of our own food, and then I spent a lot of my childhood in Bali, living in a rural area, which was, Balinese rice paddies they're quite famous in terms of their propagation,
Yeah.
seed propagation, how they use them. They use, for instance, rather than using pesticides, they have ducks, and
Oh,
you've got
yeah.
men who train ducks, and they go through these rice paddies, and they go in there, eat all the insects,
Ducks
and
are good at eating snails.
yeah.
What else do they eat?
They eat a whole variety because it's not just snails. There's other forms of crickets and things like that as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
which can be highly active and voracious eaters as well. And obviously, they're kind of locusts is in the same
Hmm.
family, right? So there's
Yeah.
a number of things that they help with, but also they help because they're flat-footed. They disturb the water without disturbing the surface of the dirt underneath, which is important. So
Oh,
yes, sorry, I shouldn't know a lot about this, but I love data. I like information, so I tend to like take in whatever I see.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but this is amazing. So I'm definitely going to get your book in September. I'm going to figure out how to get facial recognition on my door. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Build it
No,
myself. I did play around
I
with
didn't.
BlackBerry Pis back in the day on various things, trying to, automate stuff, and to varying
I
degrees of success.
Absolutely. I did not mention it, but actually made it sound like the book was just for like amateurs and hobbyists, and that's not the case. It's the thing is, the reality is a lot of people, even in the data science space,
Mm,
like you might be, you work with NLP day in, day out, or you work
yeah,
specialize only on time series, tabular data. You have no clue how a convolutional neural network works,
yeah,
or
right.
maybe one of these other technologies. So like it's kind of cool to get out of that comfort zone and try some other kind of data or try some other kind of project. And these are all things you can do at home for your own interest. I'm not encouraging people to deploy like their facial recognition systems out in the street and monitor their neighbors.
Let whoever they wants to come into my house do it. But I'm a hobbyist in the data world, so I'll probably give it a crack anyway and fail miserably,
Yeah.
but I'll keep you updated. I want to thank you for your time. It's been really interesting, Serge, and good luck with it. And I look forward to seeing the book come out.